So I'm very excited today to have us doing something that I'd like to be a regular part of academic affairs, and that is bringing in teachers and what they're doing in terms of innovative work in the school, as well as things that have already been existing in terms of our classical program in liberal arts, like maybe perhaps and the Latin program and so on. I think when we think about our identity as a school, we have the classical liberal arts element, and we also have things that are moving in terms of experiential learning. And so today, I thought I would select out 3 different facets of work going on in the school and see if we could peer in and learn more about them. The first is the interdisciplinary work that the 8th grade Class 8 teachers have developed last summer. They developed it really looking at U.S. history through the lens of New York, and also the Constitution Works project. They're going to be very honest about the strengths and weaknesses of working in that interdisciplinary medium. The second presentation will be on the makerspace. So we may have been hearing in the community that we're getting a makerspace, but many people may not know what that is. Maggie was just given 2 morning meetings, and I know that many of you know some of the things that are going on, but I wanted to really have a greater outreach, and that is why we're filming the presentations as well. I remember when I first got here and somebody said that academic affairs was a little like a cloak and dagger meeting, so I'm trying to have us peer in on academic affairs and demystify the process and also unite teachers and administrators more often. So the makerspace will be the second presentation. The third will be by Nikki Vivian, helping us to see what blended learning is all about. She's been working with blended learning components even before 10 faculty members last year took the Online School for Girls course. So we're really considering ways in which the flipped classroom can help us out in different situations, though I wouldn't say we're going in the direction of having all flipped classrooms. It's just that we're looking at how technology can serve us best. So Nikki will show us how she uses the flipped classroom's blended elements in her science curriculum. And then after the presentations, we'll go to our agenda items that we need to take care of for the last half hour. So please start, and thank you for sharing your questions.
So in the summer of 1787, 55 men of wealth, power, position, and privilege came together in Philadelphia, originally charged only to revise their constitution, the Articles of Confederation, and not actually start something from scratch. So when I met with my 2 colleagues this summer, we actually decided to follow suit. If the Founding Fathers could do it, so could we. So we decided to jettison our former curriculum and instead of revise it, actually write a new one from scratch. So to do this, one of the things we actually were really thinking about is what would be the most age-appropriate thing to do? So how do you actually write an American history course that is, really works to 8th grade ability levels? So we decided to actually go for breadth over depth, I would say. So instead of actually hitting every single topic, which is what most survey courses do, we decided that we were going to zero in and focus and organize the material around 3 large themes. So the 3 large themes are citizenship and political institutions. Here's where we discuss the American Revolution, the American Constitution, and our Constitution Works program, which I think Dr. Hartman-Ting will be addressing. The quest for freedom, slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and civil rights. This kind of course also lends itself to our doing some unusual things. We're actually going to be teaching the civil rights movement chronologically, out of order, and actually teaching it after Reconstruction instead of following a traditional narrative. The third major theme is the growth of America. How has America grown as a country, as a continental power? And as we've adapted and had to sort of confront many of the problems of the industrial age, how have we grown? How has our government grown? And this sort of finds its form in the Progressive Era and the New Deal. Finally, the last major theme that we were actually in charge to work on is how do we actually bring New York City into the classroom? So how do we make New York City work as part of our curriculum? So what we decided to do is, at very opportune moments throughout the curriculum where we felt that we could integrate something with New York City history, such as the ratification debates, the New York City draft riots, development of urban spaces, we decided that we would actually stop, sort of go off track and explain how does this connect to New York City history. So we'll be doing some walking tours, we'll also be looking at the 9/11 memorial, and I think my colleagues will also discuss these issues in a little bit more depth.
I should say this has been so hard. I mean, change is always really exciting, and it's very liberating to suddenly think that we don't need to organize the class in the way that we did previously, but it's, there are a lot of different things that we're trying to do, and this first year really is highly experimental in my book. One of the things that we're doing, Mr. Bick mentioned that we are looking for moments to deal with New York City, right? To make the fact that we are a school in New York City studying American history something that we can draw upon and make more relevant to these girls. And some of this comes out of the middle school initiative and trying to understand how the girls learn, what they connect to, and how this can seem more relevant to them. Because if we do a survey in the upper school, do we really need to do a survey in the middle school, or can we be a little freer in our approach and sort of indulge some of our interests and use some of our resources more wisely? And so, for example, in this unit on the growth of America and on industrialization and this one, Quest for Freedom, that we're working on right now, we have a lot of sort of narrative and chronology that we think is really important because it helps the girls to understand what's going on. It's part of the story that we're telling. And we don't want the New York part of it to just seem like an add-on. We want it to be an integrated part. So for example, we did do a whole new assignment sheet this summer looking at causes of the Civil War. And then we get to the 1850s and it becomes more national than New York. And we have to make choices because we only have so much time. So, you know, now that we're in it, we're not even using the assignment sheet that we wrote this summer. We're going back and having a second look at the materials that we have we're making hard decisions about, rather than teaching many events in the 1850s, maybe we focus just on one and instead do a little bit more on slavery and abolitionism in New York. And just say, we have to let it go. It's so hard to let things go. Cutting is really hard. And so we're struggling with that. And also allowing the girls enough time, particularly for new work, is something that's hard. And so we're still trying to figure out what's appropriate in terms of how much work we can give them, particularly a curriculum that we didn't write. And so the part that and I'll pass 2 of these books, you can dump through them around, is we adopted a curriculum from the Justice Resource Center called Constitution Works. Heidi had some experience with this at Berkeley Carroll, and Noni had some experience with this at Berkeley Carroll. I mean, at her old school, excuse me. Constitution Works is, for us, we teach the Revolution, we teach the Constitution. We do a very traditional assessment where the girls need to know the different parts of government, they need to know the principles that on which our government is established. But then we moved on from there. And this was an attempt in trying to make this curriculum much more unique to the middle school, and taking something that the girls could do themselves, and that would help them to operationalize a lot of the ideas that they had. And so this curriculum involves us choosing a case. The people at the Justice Resource Center have about 12 different cases that are not real cases. They're sort of fictionalized cases that highlight either aspects of the judicial branch, the legislative, or the executive branch. That alone took us a little time to figure out. And there's a whole list of cases. Ultimately, we decided that we wanted to do something that had to do with the judicial branch. And so we chose a case called Speak Out versus the United States. And this is a case of an environmental group that protests against the expansion of a waste processing plant to include a hazardous waste incinerator in Phillipsburg, Ohio, which is a town that has been decimated by economic hardship. And so they're protesting in a park. They're regarded as environmental radicals, and there had been some turmoil at previous demonstrations, and so they're broken up by the police and they're arrested. And the case goes to federal court, and then the Speak Out lawyers are now appealing to the Supreme Court. And we chose this case because if we're going to be going to court, we thought let's not take them to court and have them talk about the executive branch. That might be confusing for the kids. And of all of the topics that we could choose from, the fact that the controversy to asphalt green is happening in our own backyard, it seemed that this might be something that the girls had thought or heard about and would connect to. So we chose that case. That was step one. And so step one is, as a group, we read through the articles and try to make the girls understand the facts, what happened. After that, as a group in class, these workbooks include 2-page summaries of real Supreme Court cases like Schenck versus the United States, Texas versus Johnson, flag burning, that we would read the 2-page summary and try to introduce the girls to the idea of precedents and how is case law used. Why would the Supreme Court agree to hear Speak Out's case? And so we read through those cases. They were assigned 2 of them a night, which seemed, we thought it was light. It was not for them. This is all very new to them and very dense and very hard and it's very conceptual. And I mean, it's very conceptual. Today I had to explain to a girl that the Speak Out group didn't violate the Constitution, right? That they broke a law, not broke the Constitution. That you can break a law, but that was actually their constitutional rights that might have been trampled. Because this is really, I think, the first exposure to a lot of this that the girls are getting. So after we review each of these cases and try to see the way law is refined from case to case and talk about why the Supreme Court would have agreed to hear those cases, then we break the girls up into groups. We assign 1/3 of the class to brief the Supreme Court justices, and those girls will listen to both sides and will be responsible for asking probing questions. I actually showed them a little bit of video of questioning going on in the Supreme Court so that they can get an idea of the banter and the interruption. We divided them into lawyers for the Speak Out group, who would represent those who had been arrested, and then lawyers for the government. And then in order to try to help build some of their own leadership skills and to try to get these groups working well, we did appoint a chief justice and chief counsel for each side who has been acting as the team leader. It's really hard to have a large component of our curriculum be done as a group project, right? This isn't a small project, and this isn't a project that's in addition to regular curriculum. This is the curriculum. And so we're still very much struggling with how we can properly assess these girls and understand and validate different aspects of their experience. And so in our meeting tomorrow, we're right in the midst of this now. We finish with this unit next week. This Friday is our field trip. Trying to come up with a self-assessment rubric for the girls so that maybe they can reflect on this and ask them how they graded themselves. Then, after the girls have had time to think about the cases from their relative perspectives, we gave the girls, just let me copy, we can pass this out. We didn't really like the materials that were provided by Justice Resource Center, so we wrote our own guide to brief writing. Amanda did some digging around on a few law schools' websites just to get an idea of like what a real legal brief looks like, because we try to make it as authentic as possible. So we have the girls use this as a template for the group brief that they're producing. You can see the justices on the back were asked to do something a little bit different. And then the girls just submitted today their briefs that they will use as the basis for making their oral arguments in the court. And they're pretty fun. I can read you a few lines. Your Honors, we ask that you drop all charges of disorderly conduct against our clients, the members of Speak Out. These charges are a denial of our clients' First Amendment right of freedom of speech and assembly. On July 4th, our clients, and then it goes on and it recounts the case, but it goes on, Speak Out raised an important question about when limits should be placed on freedom of speech guaranteed by the First Amendment. Free speech is an important right in our country that protects the people of the United States from tyrannical government. And then it goes on. So they're taking ideas that we studied and they're having to, with relatively little guidance, which I will confess has been very uncomfortable for me. So it's very hard. Figure out what is applicable and to building a strong argument. Then today, everybody brought in their materials and swapped so that everybody will be able to anticipate arguments and come up with the best cases that they have. The justices produce their list of questions, then they will refine, they're working, those are drafts today. They will have their finished product on Friday, at least the lawyers for and against will have their finished product on Friday. And that will be the basis of their oral argumentation in the courthouse. We go to the Federal Bankruptcy Court in Brooklyn, where we will have a real courtroom environment, and the girls will present. We don't facilitate. People from the Justice Resource Center will be doing the facilitate, which I think is actually really good. That will be great. The girls are being asked to come in professionally dressed, out of uniform, and they will hold oral argumentation, and then the justices will either write a unanimous decision, where they will divide up and have a majority and a dissenting opinion, and they come back after they've heard arguments to make their decisions. So for two groups, their project is due on Friday. For the judges, it's due the Friday after that, and then they will render a decision. We allotted 5 weeks for this, which seems incredibly long to us, but I mean, it feels really long. Although I'm not sure how we could have sped it up, and that's something that once we've gone through this, we'll have to figure out if this was too much, not enough, or just right in terms of the time. It really is quite different than anything we've done with them before. We really did feel like we needed to make some modifications to the curriculum that we were provided. And so, yeah, the jury's out.
How were the roles distributed between judge or justice?
In my case, badly. I really am like.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to, personally, I made groups that were based on social dynamics. And then in class, before I broke them up, we had the girls have a discussion. And I really wanted this is probably because I coach debate, I really wanted the girls to be assigned to the side that was not the side they had an actual affinity for, right? So as I was listening, I was making quick modifications to my list. And in doing that, I didn't properly account for all the social dynamics. So I would do that differently next time.
Yeah, and I would say that leadership opportunities were often given to girls who either were looking for more of a challenge or whose voice wasn't necessarily heard as often as some of the other girls, but who had a lot of, you could tell there's that bubbling potential. So we really took advantage of the leadership roles to kind of have them manage their groups. And for the most part, they've really been rising to the occasion. So.
What were the toughest, you mentioned not having complete management all the time the way that you would, and knowing that you're disseminating the curriculum that you really want to make sure that the girls master. What were some other points where you really had to kind of let go and you're still really waiting to, the jury's out about whether you like the program or not, but where were those points where it felt most uncomfortable or least like what you're doing?
I would say being entirely impartial and really not, during the presentation of the individual cases and even talking about this case, not completely poker-faced and actually not giving the students any sense of how you feel about it. That was probably the big challenge. And I think I was able to do that. I don't think they know how I'm sort of leaning in the case.
I mean, for me, I really wanted to write all the justices' questions myself. They would sort of get to the point. The questions are good, we're never going to get to what's important. And then listening to my group, I mean, I did at one point stop the discussion because the group is really caught up on the fact that Speak Out was bothering people with their protest, right? I mean, what the heck is protest? Of course they're bothering, right? So I put images up of water hoses and dogs, from civil rights protests and said, are you supposed to say, please, can I have my Of course it's disruptive. Is that a fair standard? So, there were moments when you kind of jump in and have to be like, they're in they don't know anything. Like you have to sort of make them get to the larger issues at stake, or they're just gonna zero in on the 1 or 2 points that they understand most easily, right? Without having sort of more, yeah, so that's been kind of hard.
And,
Okay, go ahead. Well, I may go in a different direction, so.
I'm gonna veer off in a completely different
Okay.
direction.
So when the jury's deliberating,
Yeah.
and you're trying to decide whether it's effective or not, what's the jury gonna be talking about? How are you gonna
Jury and
decide?
us.
Yeah, you, like you said, the jury is out, we're not sure whether this is the right way to go.
I
or
wanna
not.
see what happens in the courtroom, really. I mean, I've seen, some of the writing is good, some of it is bad, you know, but may get better by Friday. I mean, it's a draft. I had girls come to me today to throw their teammates under the bus, and, you know, I told them, sometimes you have to pick up a little bit of slack, you know, but we're aware and do the best you can do and produce the best product that you can. But, you know, so we'll see what comes in on Friday, and we'll also see the way they are able to speak when they're with people who are not us in a classroom environment. And hoping that if it's a lively discussion about big issues, I think I'll feel really happy. If it ends up being sort of choppy and not, if they seem like they own it and that they understand the material and have changed in some way, think about their rights, think about citizenship, think about the concept, if they seem to have gotten some of that, which is something they'll carry beyond the 8th grade, I know I'll be happy. If it turns out to just be a unit, then I won't think it's worth it.
Do you think that they were prepped for the amount of group work that was required? I'm not by you, I'm saying, does our middle school do enough? Right, when we had graduates come back a few years ago, they said, we wish we had gotten more experience working in groups, at least in the upper school, because the real world and college is group work. And I think it's amazing what we're asking the girls to do in terms of the group work. Is it new to them? Do you feel that this is very new to them?
Given how challenging they seem to find it, I don't wanna say it doesn't exist, obviously it does
Right,
exist,
right.
but I
To
think
this
it's,
level, you think that's-
it's something you can never have too much of, right?
Right.
Especially at this stage, so.
You can't have too much of it.
Is this the most that they've been asked to do as of yet? in
Yeah.
their experience?
Yeah. Several times we gave them most of last week to actually write the briefs in class. And I actually saw Ms. Goodman in the hallway and asked her to come in and watch, because I wasn't actually doing very much. And I think it was a wonderful opportunity for them to take ownership of the different roles. And even though there were very strongly articulated directions, for them to actually work independently of explicit teacher directions.
Yeah.
I wasn't sitting there for all of last week telling them, this is specifically how you do the brief. I mean, we did give them sort of directions, but they were doing a lot of it without me having to do very much.
And was that hard for them?
No, in fact, I actually think I was very impressed with how much they were able to just do it without me, and I actually was so impressed I had to come and watch it.
And I had to turn 2 girls in, and, you know, for iPad violations.
Right.
For squandering their time.
Right.
All right, well, let's make
It's challenging for me as a teacher, I think it's challenging for them. I think that we are going to develop a rubric that next year I would give them before we very specifically, at the first time that we introduced this unit, we gave them parameters for assessment where we explained that we will, you know, be monitoring effort and, you know, the way that they work in class. I mean, we did not just sort of give it to them and not talk about these things. I think maybe it needs to be a little bit more deliberate, because I think some girls have regarded it as a reprieve. Since group work, you have to do more of it in work, and so they'd be happy. Their workload is lightened. I think others have taken it very seriously and feel terrified that they're gonna get a bad grade because other girls aren't working. Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
group work is very hard, and we will refine it as we go. But it's a big responsibility for 8th graders to figure out how to do this. And I did, 2 girls today, I ended up saying, you're gonna have to work in groups your whole life, and you're gonna have to figure out how to motivate other members, or at least make sure your part is so outstanding that your approach.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I really like the self-assessment rubric idea, and I think if they were to self-assess and assess their group, that might be helpful for you writing a rubric for next year. Just that it's very interesting to see an individual's perspective of group work, and then see kind of the feedback you get from other group members. I think it can be very helpful for group expectations.
Although I really, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Ellen.
I really find the whole sort of, I know, I mean, we've been having some emails going back and forth in our department. I agree they should be able to come without feeling like they're snitching. But it does feel like snitching to me almost. I mean, it's very, I really don't enjoy this aspect of moderating their interactions with one another, in part because there's so much that's hidden from me. I can only tell so much about what's going on in the classroom, and I think these kids are pretty savvy at how they explain the situation to their content.
It could be interesting if this year's, when their next year's nines come speak to the eights about
Yeah.
the experience.
So I think you're creating a kind of sticky social situation for them in which the issue of fairness is going to emerge, and they have to sort of navigate that. And I agree that I think in the history department and in leadership work, we need to be very intentional about teaching them how to collaborate.
Right.
It really is. It's not going to go away. It's just going to be more and more part of their lives.
Maybe we need to
College and beyond.
do that more
Yeah,
intentionally
I'd
next
love
year.
to do that work. I just want to say that in honor of your work and your presentation today, I've put up on the third floor in our history department bulletin board, objects from New York City,
Yeah, cool.
from that book, 101 Objects.
Oh, cool.
So I really thank you for your everything you've done and your openness to revising the curriculum, thinking about it differently, and I was just really excited.
We got Amanda.
So,
Totally other girl.
you know, a lot of what we did really also built upon the programs that we have and the initiatives that we have at Nightingale. So obviously Constitution Works really leverages public speaking and leadership skills and group work, which is so important. But also, you know, we have this wonderful DC trip with the 8th grade, and traditionally there hasn't been a connection like there is with the London trip and the 9th grade, and we wanted to change that. So a lot of the changes that we made in the curriculum were also made so that they could link with the DC trip. So for instance, you know, we have this great new company that Claire and Paul have found. So there's going to be there's always a fun group bonding component, but the history component is really going to link with what we're doing. So we have a huge memorialization unit that's completely new, and it really capitalizes on their experience in DC and kind of understanding what it means to memorialize. So what does it mean to leave a legacy? You know, how do memorials kind of capture legacies of events or people? And so they are going to be accountable for this on their trip. They're going to come back and present about monuments that they've seen. It's not just the design, it's really, you know, how are these monuments or memorials memorializing people or events? And then we're going to talk about kind of the difference between history and memory, kind of when one transitions to the other. And there's no better example of that than 9/11, which is really transitioning as we speak from memory, you know, collective memory that we have to history. None of our students really in the entire school, certainly not in middle school, have experienced 9/11. They do not have a first-hand account of what it's like. Some of them may not even know the details. So for us to have to teach it from scratch is kind of interesting, you know, to think about how do you really teach this to someone who has no recollection of what happened. And so they're leveraging their experience with memorials in DC to really understand 9/11. And we're going to teach the details of the day, and then they will be charged with designing an exhibit that's focused on a certain theme. And it's not about the design, it's really about the words that are used, the intended audience. You know, how do you capture, you know, the people who died? You know, you're going to call them victims. How are you going to memorialize those people? And then we are going to visit the new memorial and museum downtown afterwards, and they can compare kind of what they thought with what they're seeing, because as we all know, it's been very controversial. You know, this huge project is taking place in our own city. So, you know, where possible, we're really trying to capitalize on the great work that's going on in our curriculum. Another example is civil rights, which really builds upon the inclusivity work that's going on. We purposefully, as was mentioned, are including it after the Civil War and Reconstruction. So the question really is, what does it mean to be free? Are we free now? And so we're looking at not only the rights of African Americans in context of slavery, but the rights of women, gay rights. We've really expanded the scope of our civil rights unit to build upon the really great things that we're doing in the school as well. So we're really excited.
Can you also mention the Gilder Lehrman seminar that we attended on memorials? Because I think
Sure.
this has kind of been in the works for a couple of years.
Yeah, through Nightingale, had the good fortune of attending the Gilder Lehrman Institute seminar on 9/11 and memorialization, which was taught by David Blake, who's a historian at Yale. He was here a couple of years ago. He's a Civil War scholar and also kind of an expert on memory and history. So it took place downtown, got to go kind of inside the museum when it was being constructed and really understand, that they interviewed so many historians as a part of this project. So it really has deep roots in history, which we're really exploring in our curriculum.
My major field of study for my PhD was urban and social history, so I had a background in this, but I also did the Gilder Lehrman program in New York City history led by Kenneth Jackson.
And so then, yeah. So professional development connection.
It was really interesting to hear what you were just talking about, because I actually teach all the aides, and as you know, we have a 3D printer, and I teach them a design unit, and I was just thinking that it would be really awesome when we came back to actually have them design their own memorial and 3D print that.
That would be cool.
Instead of doing design separate, which we do now, but for them to include all that together
That would be wonderful.
and to design their own memorial on the backside of what you do with all the memorial work, and then even to do more group work maybe, but to do it, because they've seen in XYZs, but for each XYZ group to design their own memorial.
Perhaps
That would
with
be
our
amazing.
teacher, perhaps have a more on our teacher.
Yeah, I mean, but it would be, it would be a really cool way to use design.
Let's talk. That would be
So U.S. history is a topic that students return to in the upper school.
Yes.
So any sacrifice of details in the chronology can be filled in later on. It's in the upper school curriculum, I imagine. So is your subject is probably more suited to it than a subject that did not have a return later on in the upper school. So do you think if you did not return to it, it wouldn't make sense to leave those gaps or have, without those details?
Yeah, I would not be in favor of this if we didn't have a survey. I mean, we had some discussion when we were first thinking about some of the ways we wanted to use some resources and ideas for curriculum that we had. I in particular felt it was really important that the girls have a thorough survey experience once, and that we could do more of that in that upper school was the right time for that approach, and that middle school would let us be a little more experimental and let go of the hard chronology and try to really approach things a little more thematically and experientially.
So you
It was-
flip
That
it.
was more developmental.
It was so interesting to see what happens when those girls get to 11th grade
Right.
and what they take over. Because I found it always very inconsistent what the girls had in 11th grade based upon what they were covering.
Right.
So this
I mean,
was
it's interesting, it is interesting when we think about the APs and things like that, what happens when they're not having two exposures to some of this, but those are all big other debates, but related.
It's really admirable what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's really, it really is. It's amazing. It's very inspiring.
Thank you. Paul, Bill, and Maggie are going to take us into the world of maker spaces.
Thank you. No pun intended.
Oh, I didn't know that. And she may have to retire. You know, I returned with the number of girls I was supposed to return. So
That's a successful
But
career.
anyway, it's not going direction. You know, the thing that was the most annoying was the constant adjustment and bringing back the swim caps. And I don't know someone else would.
No, that's okay. Okay, so for those of you that did see my morning meeting, I've changed it, so hopefully you won't be bored to death. So, quickly, the maker movement, I personally got involved with it because, oh, hold on, what? Here we go, yes, okay. Because of my own work, I wanted to make my own work have some sort of interactive qualities. And many of you know I lived in Italy for a few years, a long time ago. And of course, a natural connection with the maker movement is the Renaissance, because art, science, technology, everything was very much interdisciplinary with big then. Anyway, so I thought this was kind of pathetic, but you can decide for yourself. So you got an email a few weeks ago when I was talking about my morning meeting, and Lamore Freed, she is owns Adafruit, which is a huge technology company downtown. They make computer parts like Arduino. She is an engineer, designs all sorts of products, extremely successful. And anyway, she and Leonardo have a lot in common, but I think she's probably going to die a very rich woman, unlike him. This is a crossbow that he designed for war. I think it's a very funny piece. So you can see, look, there's a person right there. That's how big that thing is. So, you know, he went out on some tangents, as I will momentarily. Here's Lamore again, first female engineer on the cover of Wired magazine. And having like smart technologies, it's been around forever. These are two book covers that I really like. The first one over here, just take note of this mark right there, and I'll show you something in just a moment. This book, the ink right here is conductive ink, so you can actually put a battery here and have all sorts of things happen. I have a video which unfortunately I don't think we're going to have time to show. It's only 3 minutes, but it is amazing. I will send it to you because I think you'd enjoy it. So this is a smart technology from 1678. It's a sundial. Just stick your pencil in there. Okay, so here I'm going to kind of weave around a little bit. And the reason why I want to do that is because that's how I think it's important to teach when you are opening it up. I know Ellie would probably be, where'd she go? There she is. Probably drive her crazy, right? But, no, it's okay, I understand. But I think when you start to think about certain things, you kind of have to keep it open and just see where it takes you. And it can take you to some pretty weird places, as we all know. And we've seen that happen with our students, both good and bad, and it's risky, but we're always encouraging them to take risks. So the story goes that Galileo, when he was 19, was studying at the University of Pisa, and he was daydreaming and started to watch these lamps that were swinging back and forth. Well, many, many, many years later, like 30 or 40 years later, he actually designed the pendulum. Unfortunately, he died before he was able to bring it to fruition. Here's the actual pendulum that was made later on. And Nicole and Phil are going to talk about open source information, which is very big in the maker world. It's so fascinating, I can't tell you. Just a lot of really generous people out there that will work very hard on designs, and then they just put them on the internet for anyone to improve upon, which is kind of what was happening there too. These are just, I love looking at old technologies that you can teach anew. On the right is a human sundial. Here's a girl trying it out. This is a sundial watch. I actually started at Nightingale teaching a class called Move Over Leonardo in the Hobby Horse about 20 years ago. I was actually working in the science department at Spence. Started doing Hobby Horse here, and this is where it's gone. This is a friend of mine who is a master tinker in Rome, and he just makes timepieces of all different kinds, and it's just amazing the things he does. I think it could be really interesting to have the girls make timepieces in the, okay. So, this one, I just had to throw it in there for the scheduling committee. It's an eight-day market calendar for the Greater New Preston.
I need that slide.
This is a bathhouse from Pompeii, and so let's just say you're teaching about Pompeii, and you start talking about condensation, water. So the water comes up, gets caught in vaulted ceilings, starts to run down the gutters, and then it continues the cycle again. The water's being heated with logs underneath. So let's say you're talking about that, and you start thinking, well, geez, how could this turn into a maker project? Oh, and then we've got the beautiful library in Ephesus that had these vaulted walls. They were like 4-foot spaces between the outer wall and the inner wall. And they were brilliant. All the condensation would happen between the walls, so the books were fine. They didn't get damaged, they didn't get wet. So, as you can see, I'm going kind of circuitous. This is an artist, Dutch artist, who has figured out how to create clouds by creating the perfect atmosphere inside. As you can see, you'd really have to understand your science in order to do that. A painting about condensation by Frank Moore, about condensation and about our limited resources. As you can see, the frame is a pipe with a knob on top. Condensation's going up. You can see the chemicals rising along with that. And then, okay, so here's where we got to go off on a tangent, but it'll be fun. This was Wilhelm Reich's Cloudbuster machine, and he used this, he believed he could end droughts with this machine. He did get paid $4,000 by some farmers up in Maine because he apparently did, supposedly it worked once. But he had this whole system where people would go into this box and it would draw all your like sexual mojo energy out of you, and that was the energy that he would then use to bust up clouds and cure cancer and all sorts of things. And I just thought you'd enjoy this. This is it was a co-ed school. This was just a girls' class.
That screams middle school.
Male professors, certainly.
They drew upon the writings of Wilhelm Reich, and Reich for a while actually did work with Einstein, and then Einstein kind of went, ooh, too much.
Yeah, thanks.
This is called the grossest water box, and it makes me think of going back to the ceiling in Pompeii, the ribbed, vaulted areas where the condensation happens. And this just draws moisture from the air, and you're able to keep plants alive in the desert for, it's really an amazing product that somebody made. You could make something like that in a MakerBot, right? This is another product, kind of big for a MakerBot, but figure something out. Everything doesn't have to be made in the MakerBot, by the way. We have laser machines, all sorts of cool things. So, this invention can provide villages with more than 25 gallons of clean drinking water. who are makers. My apologies, I have a bit of a throat thing today. So, I've been working out in a couple different maker spaces in Brooklyn, and it's been fascinating, the people I've met. The woman working next to me is a geneticist during the day up at Columbia. I mean, but I will say that men are taking the lead, for sure. It's usually at least eight or nine guys to every girl, woman in there. But here's some great pictures of women in maker spaces, and again, this has just gotten a lot of attention, and I think it's here to stay. This is a gal I met at the Maker Faire out in Queens, 17 years old, from New Jersey, made this robotic prosthetic hand. This gal, another student project, designed this coat that turns into a sleeping bag. She now has a big company in Detroit, has hired only former, well, they were homeless before she hired them. This was another student project out in Stanford. It's called the Embrace Warmer. You can kind of see about that. It works as an incubator at a fraction of the cost. I love this one. I think, how did they think that up? But whatever, it works. So, this is Obama. He hosted a Maker Faire. She designed this bench that can charge cell phones. As you can see, he's totally on board with this, especially for women. This is kind of a teaser for the girls. They loved it. Ooh, these were made in a MakerBot. These are GPS shoes. Never get lost again. These shoes talk while you walk, while they say whatever you program. It can be used in design. This is a beautiful chandelier. There's all these new technologies, solar paint, solar fabrics. Pretty soon you'll be able to plug your cell phone in. Solar paint, they're painting houses in Australia with it now, so that they can be kind of off-print, okay? This is an ear made in a MakerBot, made with human tissue with recycled plastic. Love this one. EG headband, allowing for hands-free use of computers. It's perfectly for severely disabled people. This is electric paint. And here's some gals that made some electric paint. She's obviously holding a battery on her side. This guy made a 3D printer out of e-waste. This fella, 19 years old, figured out how to get rid of a lot of those plastic bottles in the bottom of the ocean. One of my favorite pieces, this person designed a merry-go-round that now provides energy for an entire village down in Ghana. Now Phil says, yeah, but it blow the phone out, so whatever. She got an award for it, so I put her in. I think it's interesting. Now MIT, you can apply with a maker portfolio. This is a gal who graduated from MIT. She's the CEO of Little Bits, which these are great little electronic parts that you can hook up. They're all color-coded to make learning electronics easy, and it really is. This is the fellow, the engineer I've been working with in a makerspace that he's been helping me with do some of the real tough stuff, which I have learned so much this past summer. So I want to ask you guys, if you had this painting and you decided, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could make the sun come up, and then the sun sets and then the moon comes up, and when the moon's up, maybe it reflects into the water so that, and it would be kind of like a surrealist painting, so it would look like that. Any ideas? How could we do that? Anybody? And not animation. Nobody? No. No. It's self-contained, completely self-contained. That's part of it.
What was it? What'd you say?
She said mirror. What it has is a two-way mirror behind it, you know, like the kind of you're in an interrogation room. Hopefully y'all don't know what that is, but and then there's lights that go on a fixture that would trigger it would go on and off with the timer, but it would be independent. Okay, I gotta move because I can see Nicole's like, ah, we're out of time. This is the schematic for a piece that I'm working on. I have been learning so much. It's really been incredible. It's not easy at all, but I actually love it. I think about it all the time. I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun if her drawing was in the hallway and maybe when you walked past, she smiled at you, you know? Why not? Or maybe this turned into winter. Allegra's, yes.
I love this. I tried to buy it from
Or, I know.
I did.
Her parents would not let that one go. But what if all the leaves started to fall off? Or this one, this cyclone, maybe Ketty's painting where, what if the cyclone was actually in there and zooming around somehow? And then this is a journal entry by a 7th grader that I thought tied in with the last one. And who knows, maybe this will all start, you know, this drawing is gonna lead somewhere else. I'm not gonna show you this because we don't have time. I will send it to you because it's amazing. It's a 3-minute video. There's a couple of really good videos right here that I'd love for you to watch, but that's it for now. Thanks.
So Maggie talked about the what, which was the tinkering, and Phil and I are going to talk about the how. So there's so much amazing tinkering to be done, but the question is, how do we make that happen at Nightingale? And so that's where we come up with the makerspace that will be happening at Nightingale when the new building opens. So we can skip through some of this because Maggie already talked about this. But a makerspace is a space that's dedicated to the art of tinkering. And it's already equipped with all the tools that you might need. The 3D printer we already have, but there's lots of hand tools and power tools and Arduino boards, like Maggie said, that we don't have access and our girls don't have access to right now. That if they did have access to, they could make their artwork light up, or they could make their own memorial by just popping into the room and having all these things available without necessarily having to go home and grab their stall, which they may or may not have and their parents may not want them to use unattended, but that they would have a space and for that to happen. So Marymount actually has a makerspace that they've had for many years, and it's very robust. So here's a few pictures. That's not their makerspace. That's somebody else's, but it's a cool makerspace. This is a laser cutter, actually, which cuts acrylic and wood. And it also will etch wood as well.
It's pretty big.
It's very big. So what makes a maker? You want to summarize this?
I mean, if you think about some of the examples that Maggie showed, makers are people who identify problems and then come up with solutions to those problems. It may be outside of the box or may just be a reinventing of an existing solution to a problem. So the idea here is we don't want to limit kids as they go in the creation process, and we want to have the tools to be able to support them to come up with these ideas that might end up turning into something like Adafruit or Little Bits or those types of situations where how in the world would you ever think about essentially Little Bits is just like a Lego kit of circuitry for little hands, right? Little kids to be able to experiment with. It's great, super great idea. The whole idea behind the makerspace is that there's spaces that support that type of learning and support collaboration in that process too, because none of these people work in isolation.
And one of the things that, Phil and I wrote an article about this for the faculty newsletter, and one of the things that we said in the article is that we understand that not every girl will leave Nightingale being an engineer, but we want every girl to be able to think like one if she needs to be able to. And that's the hope behind this room, is that when a girl goes out and she needs to be able to think like an engineer, she has the skills to be able to do that. And that's really what this makerspace can allow to happen on a much bigger scale than we can provide now. There's so many great things already happening in art, and there's great things happening in science, and there's great things starting to happen in technology and computer science, but allowing a room with all the tools that they need to make that happen in a space for that to happen is really an amazing opportunity. There's some more pictures.
I think providing autonomy to the girls too,
Yeah.
where they can It doesn't have to be a class
No,
necessarily.
it doesn't.
If it's just a space like, hey, I've got this idea, I want to act on it. Where can I go to act on it? I have no place, or the makerspace could serve that purpose.
Right. So why making matters for learning? I think we've kind of already talked about this. But another, just like when Ali was, and they were sitting here talking, and my wheels were just turning. But this maker space and the whole maker movement provides such a collaborative, it's all about the collaborative spirit. It's not about technology, and it's not about science, and it's not about art. It's really about all of the curriculum and how we can make together, right? How we can allow each girl to express together and to fully express the curriculum, right? In ways that maybe we couldn't before, or in a depth that maybe wasn't available before. So I think that kind of embraces why this is so important. You know, John, we often talk about you really. Maybe John Lokery will walk by that maker space and say, art history, this would be a great reason to walk into this room because there's so many ways that you could make, right, for art history. And so that you might walk in there and do that. Or for history, they could come in and use the sewing machine to create timepieces of actual clothing or whatever it is. But that would be available to them. Impact on education, inspiration, inviting students to participate in the creative economy and direct their own future. Innovation, serving as a catalyst for grassroots invention. Education, building a connection between the community and the learners. Because really we create together. I'm doing this in my TENS class, which I'll talk about in a second, but we really are doing this together. It's not them and me, it's really us together. Collaboration, it's cross-divisional and interdepartmental. Collaboration is common. So the roles, new kind of teacher. The roles really do change from a typical, I think what people assume is a typical teacher. Lots of teachers already at Nightingale teach this way. So for many of you, these won't be role shifts, but project manager oversees the team and plans, risks, schedules, budgets, and conflicts. Many of these things are the things Ellie was talking about, right? Principal investigator, students are learning from and consulting with the teacher and with one another while pursuing projects that are generally of their own design. So what happens in the makerspace is not me saying, girls, now you will design a bridge. It's the girls saying, I have all these things. I'm gonna go build a table. You know, that's what I want to do, and I'm going to build the best table there is. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to help you build that table. And it's allowing them to do that, even if I really want them to build a bridge. Coach. The best coaches learn what works well with their players and improve the curriculum and technique from season to season. Research librarian, Diane. I don't lead them, I aid them. Tools and materials. So these are some of the tools and materials that you would see in a makerspace. Woodworking tools, Scott has some, but these are some higher powered woodworking tools like the laser cutter that we just mentioned. Metalworking, electronics from basic circuit design to like Arduinos, to microcontrollers, robotics, and electromechanisms. Textiles, sewing machines, fabrics, zippers, computers. Digital fabrication, 3D printing, so additive manufacturing, laser cutting, so subtractive manufacturing, and then computer numerical control. So things like Makey-Makeys. I'll show you what a Makey-Makey is later. You're gonna love Makey-Makeys, they're fantastic. I'm gonna show you what that is. So lights, right? These are just LED lights that get programmed in. Those can be added to fabric. So you have lit fabric, right? This is a laser cut dinosaur, being assembled together. This is an acrylic cut, so the girls come back from London could design their own imagination of the London skyline. And then this is the hand tools and the sewing machines, is what it looks like. Obviously there's lots of rules, right, because there's lots of tools. But this is a Makey-Makey. It's a computer processing board, and you can program it, and so this guy has made the bananas the piano keys, so it's a banana piano. So you can program it to do whatever you want, but this is a banana piano. So you program this particular board to do whatever you want it to do with whatever
Those
tools
are like
you want.
$25.
Yeah, it's super inexpensive. They're really great.
Super fun.
Super fun. So some making is happening at Nightingale. Of course, we know we have a great art program already in place, and they've been doing making for years. I mean, they're the original makers, right? We have been in our class 10. My foundations class shifted a little bit this year to take advantage of the 3D printer. And so the girls have been doing design process. It's been really fun and interesting. I've worked with, where's the math department? Is Sally here? Anybody? Yeah, Sally! So the math department, I had to consult with them because the girls couldn't figure out how to scale an airplane to an 8 by 8 by 8 inch printable surface. It was pandemonium because they had to get it to millimeters and into 8 by 8 by 8, and it was such a great experience because I had no idea that we were going to run into that problem, and I did not plan for it, and I planned that we would just move on through, and I was like, I don't even know how to teach you that. I did not prepare for that, so I'm like, Google it, just Google it, just pull up Google and figure it out. It's not that hard, And then they wanted hinges, This one's an egg strainer. She hates that her eggshell always gets in her egg. So it's going to catch the shell and let the egg go through. But she needed a hinge, and she couldn't figure out how to design a hinge. And I was like, somebody's made a hinge. You just go get that hinge. She's like, that's stealing. I was like, it's not stealing. It's called open source, Somebody's already made it, and they're sharing. But the girl's like, it's copyright. So it opened this whole new conversation about what is copyright and what is open source and what is available to be shared. So now the girls are like pros at open sourcing. So now we have to talk about what is really open sourcing, right, and what is stealing. Yes?
Are things labeled open source? Because we
Yeah,
teach
so
them
we talk about Creative Commons. Yeah, it's great.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's hard. It's hard. So there's something called Creative Commons in the design world, and it allows them to either say that you can take this and make it whatever you want, or you can take it but you have to attribute it back to me, or
But people
whatever it is.
write that on their designs.
Yeah, right, that's right. Their design, they select it, right.
And there
So
are also some websites that you just know if anybody's put anything on Instructables, go for
then
it.
it's,
You know.
free to use, that's right.
And there's several websites like that.
Right. So it's been so interesting because the girls have gone from thinking they need to make every single thing and needing control over every element of their design to being like, this great friend of mine, in China, they refer to their friends who they take from often. They're like, he is so amazing. He makes all of these great hinges. And my friend Sam, in Australia, I actually emailed him to ask him if he could make me a better hinge. And they have. They've been in contact with Sam, who's an excellent hinge maker, to say, I need a hinge that's about a little bit smaller. Could you make me one? And it's been really amazing because they actually are emailing Sam, and we're doing it through Nightingale just in case Sam turns out to be a weirdo, so that I can track him down. But it's great. But it's been such a great. We're sharing across country. We're going to another continent to get our hinges. We're really outsourcing. It's great. This is a cupcake measurer. She hates not getting the right amount of cupcake batter. This is the beginnings of a different kind of soda can that fits a smaller hand. This is a great design. It doesn't look like much, but it's actually a personal levitation device that will levitate you over the crowds on the sidewalk. This will just lift you over all the people, all the tourists, so that you can get over them into where you need to be. And she's done extensive research on the proper gases and liquids that need to be inside.
She doesn't like it.
So
Inus.
yes, it is. It totally is.
We discussed this.
Credit.
She gets frustrated at the blue doors.
You can see how
mornings.
this project took so many different forms from, oh man, I just really need the right amount of cupcake batter to I really need to fly over the amount of people that are in front of me. And each girl picked something that really meant something to them.
and they've been able to run with that. This is actually, it goes over your fingernail for when your nails are wet, so that you don't smudge your nail polish. From the nail salon, the nail bars. We also have a 3D printing club that Maggie helps me out with in the middle school. So this is the girls. This is actually Mr. Cook printing. We figured out how to 3D scan human beings. I actually followed this blog, and I read that I could like hook a bunch of things we already had together. So I tinkered this weird solution together, and I figured out we could scan humans. So I call Mr. Cook, I'm like, get up here really quick, come here, come here. So he runs up with his coffee, and I'm like, stand right there, stand right there. All right, now turn in a circle. He's like, what are you doing? I said, just trust me on this one. And so he just turns in a circle, and I'm like, all right, I'll tell you when it's done. He's like, I don't know what you're doing. So then I just went and printed him downstairs, and so then I just started scanning all the girls in the 3D printing club. So now there's all these tiny 3D printed middle schoolers just running around. This is the craziest thing, and they think it's hilarious. It's like amazing. So here they are designing. This is their own designs. You know, they're just 3D designing away, and it's really incredible what they're able to do. And I give them like zero instruction on the actual tools themselves. And the printer I do, but the design software, they just tinker it. They tinker. They are the experts. They tinker.
I would have no legs. I think that's a generational difference.
So questions?
I love the confidence building. I mean, if you believe you can create it, you do it.
Yeah.
Right? So.
The girls really love it. I mean, the middle school girls love it, and the upper school girls, they come to class, they're like, this is the best class. And maybe it's because I play Disney music. I mean, it's probably what it is. But I mean, they really are excited to come and to work on something that is truly just theirs, right? It is their own design, and it's just what we can 3D print. I mean, I can only imagine how much that could multiply if every girl could have that experience, right, with or without a class. If they had 40 minutes in their schedule and they could just walk by a room and say, Miss Blanford, what is this room? Can I make something? And I can say, oh yeah, just come on in. Let's, let me show you what these tools are and just have at it. I mean, it's really amazing to think that that could happen here and that every girl can have that experience, because it really does allow each girl to kind of just tap into what they're good at and what they enjoy. And for the art would have an extension of high-powered tools to extend what they're already doing to a different level, which is amazing. And it continues this, or it starts to a whole STEAM movement here that we've kind of been doing in pockets, right? Phil and Scott and I have been working on like a collaborative unit together and doing things, and Maggie and I work together, so it just provides a place, I think, for everybody to be able to work together, and I think it could be a really special place. Yeah, and I mean, and I think that, and Phil and I were like, what would this be like? Like, what would it look like? And I said, and that's when we came up with, I was like, I imagine John walking by and like, what is this? And can I come here too? And I'd be like, yes, please, come in. Let me show you how you could use this for art history. I'm like, I'm going to have to figure out how he's going to use it for art history, but I'm going to have an answer when he comes in the door, but that would be it, is that we would, like, I might not have all the answers, but that you would come in the door and we know the tools and what they can do, and art history, and together we can figure out what can be made, right? So, I mean, that's what I imagine, is that it's open not just for girls, but for faculty too, right? For anybody to come in and make, because it's best if we're all making together. If the girls walk in and they see Mr. Burke hammering away, that's going to be like really awesome. Like, Mr. Burke, what are you making? He's like, I have no idea. I'm just making something, And they're like, I'm going to make something too. So they're like, I'm going to make something too. And so then everybody's kind of making together, and it's not just the middle school and upper school. It's extendable into a lower school program, and I think it's a really exciting moment. And yeah.
I'm glad it's happening at the same time as schedule review, because I think we could be very mindful of making sure that interdisciplinary time can be created, and some of what you were just describing, because I think the fluidity of it is probably its genius. And if you start to micromanage it too much,
Right.
then you lose some of the beauty of it.
Are there attributes that girls possess, do you think make them particularly strong? Would, like, is it the creative, is it the, or is it the sort of things with every girl to sort of leverage their strengths?
I think it depends, depending on the girl. Some-
Resilience, because
Yeah.
it's,
You fail a
you
lot.
fail a lot.
Yeah.
And that is what I think, I mean, I'm just speaking from personal experience, getting involved with this stuff, where, you know, you just feel like, oh, I can never figure this out, I'm just not smart enough, or whatever. And you just gotta
Right.
keep trying, different arrangements, but you learn so much, and you learn so much more from your, you know, failures, and just being determined. I mean, I have a couple pieces I've been working on for 6 months, and I'm nowhere near where
Yeah.
I'm getting there, but
The girls don't seem to be as afraid as I think we, like in that
I think the younger
realm,
ones
they
are
don't seem to
better
be
than
as
the older
afraid.
ones.
Yeah.
The older ones get more
Right.
timid, they don't wanna make mistakes.
Yeah.
By 8th grade,
Yeah.
they're like, "Ugh,
But like
what if I
even
do
my
that?"
10s are not like we're just now printing our prototypes and they're like, I'm pretty sure this is not gonna work. Oh well, I'll print it anyway. We'll see what happens and I'll do it again. Like but we've sort of talked about, like, I'm trying to build that up in them is that it's probably, you know, I showed them pictures of like epic disasters first.
Yeah.
Right? But they've become less, they're not so caught up in the fact that the first one has to be perfect, right? And the middle schoolers, I mean, they just whatever.
Yeah.
I don't
I'm
think
just
they
gonna throw
realize-
whatever on here,
I don't realize
even
how
know
many
about it.
iterations of iPhone
Yeah.
occurred
Yeah.
for the very first iPhone.
Yeah.
Thousands of
Yeah.
prototypes.
Yeah.
That's something that they don't see.
Yeah.
They do science experiments, it always works.
Yeah.
Well, that's not research. If you've ever done
Right.
scientific research, it works
Right.
1% of the time,
Right.
not 99% of the time.
Right.
So,
We're almost just asking them to go back to a younger time, right? Like, my house is a makerspace every night with my 5 and 8-year-old, right? Because they have saucepans, they have like
Yeah.
my stockings, and they have glue.
Yeah.
That's a bad mix. That's a bad mix.
Yeah, and then where it's like, right, that's too loud,
Right.
that's mine, put that down,
Right.
you kind of just.
Like that's not safe, that's
Which is
dangerous
yours.
and that's.
Right, which is, no, mine is
Right.
go for it, I don't know where they were stockings, so.
one thing I would,
So-
one thing I would wanna say before we, because I know we've gone over our time. I see this as a very primary way for us to support girls as being entrepreneurs, which is something that I don't think we brought up yet.
Yeah.
But if we really want to let girls act upon these ideas and show them, hey, you can do something substantial with this. And also, another big thing for me is just getting girls involved in engineering. This is a perfect avenue for them to at least say, do I like this? Is this challenge something that makes me, click? Is it something that registers with me? So, and the makerspace is a great spot to kind of have them have that experience.
Yeah, and we have that first class coming up, the introduction, or the design theory class.
Design thinking.
Design thinking class, yeah, that's coming up in the fall next year that will do just those things, right? And give them an opportunity to present, be
What grade
entrepreneurs.
is that?
Yeah,
What grade?
10 through 12.
Just a quick question.
Bill.
So I'm teaching on resilience in class 10 Closing the Gap on Wednesday. Might you have like a short video of a female maker who's failed and tried again? That I could
Sure.
show them, because we could kind of,
I'll get you.
okay, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Do you want to bump me until next time?
No,
Jennifer?
no,
Because
I
it's-
don't, no, we're gonna be
I don't
fine,
even
there's
know
nothing, we can bump the lists, because
Are you
these things
sure?
are
Because I feel like I
already.
don't even have 15 minutes and I'm afraid it's gonna be too rushed if I.
We'll wait until you're done. Wait until you're
We're
done.
so sorry.
No, it's not, these are all good stuff, I just.
No,
I'm trying to be
these
very
other
quick.
items, if you just while Nikki's getting set up, to go over. They're in the attachment to the agenda, you should see a very hard and fast schedule about when grades are posted and comments are posted. We really need to stick to that so that there is not unevenness by division in terms of when everybody can see things on the Blackbaud posting.
Rebecca and I
So
did some
that-
work this weekend and actually changed our dates, so how would we and who would we
So this part, so we just sent you this afternoon is a link to an Outlook calendar.
So we can just.
So if you could, division heads, work that out, keep the school calendar with you though, so that you can make the best decisions about when your grade meetings are.
Right, yeah.
And then, when you give me what you prefer, I'll go and meet with Susie and work it out, because usually you would sit down with Susie and go through that calendar, so Maria
The
made
dates
it.
aren't changed, like, we know we have Wednesday meetings and that's that, it would just be the dates of grades,
That's
does
right.
Susie need to know that?
No, but Maria,
Give you access.
Right, so we can just
make
take it out
edits.
there.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly, so you're gonna see, when you click on the link, you'll see the Outlook calendar. But for department heads, the key thing is to make sure that the due dates are hard and fast for turning in grades, and not to have that a sliding date. You need that all, everything to come in on time.
but what I understood, Jennifer, because of the complication we just had was while grades were open or closed for upper school and reported to parents, middle school grades that weren't finished were open. And so the point of hard and fast is two parts. So if you go change things on here, it just means that that end date still has to be aligned, because we're only opening them once, is the way I understand this.
Yeah.
Because the problems are when we have multiple openings, well, it screws things up for a variety of reasons, but they become public.
So I'll write more about this, but that is, you'll see the attachment there with the dates that have been set, and then the division heads will work on this other piece of it, and then we'll come back around to talk about it later.
All right, I'm gonna be as quick as I can because I don't want to keep anybody past 5. And I just realized your server for some reason is not working for my iPad, so some of the things I was gonna show, I really can't show in the moment, so that'll help with brevity here. So I'm gonna go through this really quickly, partly because some of you have heard of these elements of this before, and some of you though have not, so I'll try to go over things quickly. If something doesn't make sense, please stop me and I'll give a little more explanation there. So basically this is all about experiments in blended learning. That I have explored in the science electives that I teach, so that's environmental science and public health. And so first, just a little bit about blended learning versus flipped instruction, because a lot of times these are discussed together, but they do mean something different. So blended learning is when you take a traditional face-to-face class and you reduce the number of meeting times that you would normally have and replace some of those meeting times with some sort of online experience. And that's what I've actually done in the science electives, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. Flipped instruction, I use in all of my classes to some degree, and I'm sure many of you do as well, and that's where you take something that might have been done at home and you try to give some of the working time, the processing time, or the traditional homework time in class, and you do some of the lesson delivery, the content delivery at home for what would be homework then in sort of a screencasting mode or a variety of methods actually. So I will talk about a little bit of both of them, but I'm going to focus mainly on the blended learning approach. So why the electives? As was mentioned before in other contexts, this was a less risky place to try out these new technologies. In environmental science in particular, it helped to model sustainability in different ways, which is an important component of that course, of course. And I'm very interested in reaching introverts, and talked about this last year, and many of you have read Quiet and are thinking about that in different ways. I found that online discussion platforms, and they really happen in a variety of ways now, they really do encourage introverts to participate in a way that you don't get in the face-to-face classroom, and that I found to be really helpful in reaching more learners. And so what did I do? I dropped just one face-to-face meeting per 2-week cycle. So in science electives, we would have met 9 times per 2 weeks. We now meet the equivalent of 8 times in class. And I'll show you a calendar quickly so you can get a sense for what that looks like. And it's plugged in on a Saturday, it's called the online class. They don't have to do it on that Saturday, they can do it whenever they would like, as long as they complete the work before the due date for whatever the assignment was that was linked to that. So they carry out an asynchronous online lesson, and then they have some sort of digital participation in some form or another, and I'll give you an idea of what a couple of those can look like. So, what am I using? I'm using my Finalsite blog. So Finalsite is one of the LMSs that we're testing out, It's the one that is linked with the webpage, so it has a lot of similar elements to what our new webpage looks like. There's a blog component of Final Sight, and that's what I use primarily in my classes. There's also a discussion thread where if you wanted to have an ongoing back and forth, you could always use that element as well to get at some of the same outcomes. I also use Wikispaces. I don't know, is anyone familiar with Wikispaces? So a few people. I've used it in a lot of different ways over the past few years. We use it in electives for sort of bigger projects. So if it's something that someone's working on as like a case study, and everybody has their own case study that they're reporting on, they post their information to Wikispaces. Sometimes it's collaborative, so it can be a shared Wikispaces page where different people can all collaborate, or it might be a standalone individual, but they're all housed in one place. And then we can share our projects that way, either in class, sort of in face-to-face time, or they can also look at their classmates' postings outside of class and then respond to it in one way or another. I've used an app called Piazza. There's also a web version of this too. I love Piazza because it's like a debate mode where you can basically have students, maybe can watch a video, read an article or two about something, and then they have to choose a side, and they have to say what side they're on, yay or nay, or whatever the issue is, and then defend their stance, pulling information from the resources that were provided. So that's the way I'm using Piazza. And then screencasting is something that I've used for a long time now. That's one of the major ways I think that I accomplish more of the flipped instruction. It's saved me in many cases. So when I was out with a back injury, I was still screencasting from home and then delivering my lessons to AD Bio that way so they could keep learning in my absence. Same thing when I was away at an accreditation visit recently. They kept learning even though I was away through screencasting. So that's something that I use screencast-o-matic.com when I have an existing PowerPoint that I would just like to add my voice to, essentially. And I can just go through and capture whatever elements I would like to visually from the PowerPoint and overlay my voice, explain everything you've seen before. It's what I use to create this quick PowerPoint. And I use that for any new creation of a screencast that I want to use, sort of do in the moment, because it allows you to incorporate more items actually than PowerPoint and Screencast-O-Matic would do. Just a couple of other tools that you might want to check out, and this is where I would hope I'm going to show you the Final Sight calendar in a minute and show you a couple of things I've done there. The apps, though, that I'm not able to show you right now with the air server glitch, these are some really cool things that actually might apply to many of you in a different way than I've been using them in my own classes. Touch App Creator, the one in the middle, allows you to take a variety of resources and multimedia resources. They can be all print resources. They can be really whatever you want them to be. And you are able to sort of curate them into one place. So I have our lab notebooks now that are all in this app. And so the student literally just hits the app, the lab notebook launches, and you choose unit by unit where you are, you find your lab, and everything you need is in that app, essentially. So if you have a bunch of different resources that all speak to one topic, you could have that all gathered together in one sort of standalone lesson that gets converted to an app. And I'm thinking about using it for my electives in a way as for all these online classes that I'm doing, basically creating an app that houses all of those lessons. So they would launch the app and they would say, okay, this is the climate change online class, I'm going to select that, and then there's all my resources right there. So you don't have to sort of draw from different places. It collects them all and houses them in a nice, neat, organized way. It's just a go-to. So I'm thinking about incorporating that there. TouchCast allows you to use, it sort of creates like a newscasting environment where you can even have like a green screen behind you and put different things if that was meaningful to whatever you were doing. Or you could just sit there and sort of talk and have a dialogue. And so I'm thinking about using this with some of my electives as well to give instruction for the online class, where I could talk and give a short video, and then I could say, check out this website. And on the screen, sort of like in the newscast where you have the little video that pops up in the corner, the website could come up in the corner, and it's actually interactive as long as you're in the app. So if I were the student watching the video, and I said, oh, what's that all about? And I tap the little video in the corner, my video stops, that zooms in, and you actually interact with the web page in the way that you would if you were online. And as soon as they're done, they hit done, and it goes right back to me in the video wherever I left off, and I could introduce other resources that way. So it allows you to sort of talk through a process and introduce resources along the way that you can actually interact with. So that's a really cool one that I've just started to explore. And then VoiceThread I used to use for online discussions when I was first trying out this new approach. I had technical issues with VoiceThread just in getting it to work the way I wanted it to dependably, so I sort of abandoned it and started to utilize other resources. But I want to give it a go again to see if it's now working better with iPads, and now that we all have the same sort of user experience on the iPad, I think I might give that a second go because you're able to see everybody's faces and sort of hear their voices as they're participating in online discussion threads. All right, so I have just a couple minutes left. I'm going to very quickly show you what this looks like. So this is my final site page for those of you that haven't seen what it looks like yet. From this perspective. So this is my environmental science homepage, and you can see there are a lot of things here, different things, interesting things get posted here. RSS feeds are on the side to keep feeding them information, so sometimes I will pull from those resources for some of the online classes. If you look in the calendar, let me go back for 1 second. So this is what my calendar tends to look like. You can see that we meet Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? So those are our face-to-face classes. And then you can see over here is an example of the online class. So for this, they click this open, they get some information there about what they're supposed to do. This was actually using an interactive population growth website and trying to understand how many different events they've lived through and projecting population for sometime into the future. And then they were submitting this digitally through another app called Shobi. That's a really nice, clean way of getting information back and forth digitally to students. I'm using that now instead of any kind of Dropbox to turn things in. So wherever you see an online class, generally the next Wednesday is when whatever work that is assigned for that class is due. So you'll see that kind of approach. If I go to November really quickly, you can see again there's a couple of online classes here. This one, because their research paper or project is in the works, they get a free day to do research instead of carry out an online class. But this one was another one we've done recently about climate change. So they get a little bit of instruction here, they're turned loose on the work, and then they are responsible for turning in their blog response. Nikki, can you open one so we can see? Yes, that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to just go to the blog section so that you can see what these look like. So when I post a blog, this is what they look like. This was the first one we did just to test out the blog feature. So you can link things right in here. The web page is linked that I wanted them to go to, so they open it up right from the blog. There's another article that's linked there, and then they needed to respond to that. There are others that you can see here. Let me look, that one's a newer one, so I don't think there are many.
So what kind of comments are they running?
So here's the, well, and this is, this will allow you to see the variety of responses, right? My instruction was to use, they're picking an example. So this, they were picking either a natural or a human-built ecosystem somewhere in New York State. And they had to basically explain what ecosystem services that provides and what would happen if we didn't have that available to us. And I said just to illustrate in 1 to 2 paragraphs. And you can see how much some chose to. Now, it's not surprising, right, that Jasmine decided to write a book instead of 2 paragraphs, but really thoughtful responses. Right, here's another one, and they give links that they used other resources to cite their information. So just so you can get a sense, right, we've got some longer, some shorter. It really depends on what girls are having to say. The good thing is this is one of the earlier ones, or this is maybe the 3rd post that we've done. It starts to encourage them because they know others are going to be looking at these and reading these. After we did our first couple, the quality really started to improve, right? And I'm trying to get better about working in time to go back and read others. I've got to work that into the plan better so that they're able to see what everybody else has to say, right? And they're learning from their peers that way. Some of them are doing that naturally, right? They just want to know, but some of them are not, and so I need to, again, make that a more of a point. Work that into the assignment in some way. And I'm thinking about having them comment on or, some of what their peers have said. So I wish I could show you, I don't know why AirServer is not working in here, but if you have any questions at all about any of those apps that I mentioned, or the Piazza app, which is really, really great for debates, and then some of those others in terms of kind of pulling resources together and having them in one go-to, I'm more than happy to share. It's really just made it's made me have to think about teaching a little bit differently, right? Especially for some of these electives where there's so much information out there, right? A lot of it's current events based, very discussion based. I really get to learn a lot from them because I turn them loose and say, okay, you've got to bring something to the table that meets these requirements, and then we see where it goes, right? And they teach me things all the time with these case studies, which is another nice benefit. So I
So
talked a
you,
little
so
bit
you
about
also
it, but
record yourself sometimes the lecture part?
that I will
put that up.
sometimes do that for the online class, but I really like to turn them loose on other, on other things, other resources beyond me when we do it in the electives. But I do loads of screencasting and other, sometimes if we just don't finish something and I've got 5 minutes left and I just want to wrap it up, I'll screencast that quick little wrap up and just complete that lesson, right? Now I've screencasted so many times that I'm building like a library, so if you miss a day, you can just go and sort of watch that screencast from the final site page and pull up that resource. Or you can go back and study for the exam, by looking at an old screencast of a lesson from last year or something like that. All right, so I kept you over a couple minutes, sorry.
Before we jump up and run, I just wanted, how much time do we need to talk about?
I'd rather just do it, I have a middle school faculty meeting this Wednesday, so I'll come back.
Okay, so that Claire and Rebecca are going to talk about how to study in each discipline in the